Okay, hi, good night, everyone. We are now streaming live on Facebook. So, welcome, first of all, to our panelists, and welcome to all those who are logged in and all those who are going to be logging in very soon and who are trying to get on Facebook to join us here for this live stream. Good night, good night, good night. Good night to Tobago, good night to Trinidad and Tobago. Our panelists with us tonight, we have Mr. Clive Weatherhead, attorney at law and former trade unionist. We have Ms. Deborah Moore Miggins, senior attorney at law, former politician. Well, I'm not sure if that is ever former, but she used to be a leader of a political party, but definitely, one of the leading voices in Tobago. We have Dr. Vanas James, senior economist and well-known intellectual in Tobago, who has been made even more famous recently. And we have Dr. Denise Soyafat Angus, who is the former presiding officer of the Tobago House of Assembly. With us in this session, I'm seeing several prominent names. I'm seeing Brendan Gray, I'm seeing Andre Phillips, I'm seeing Berlin Roberts, I'm seeing quite a few others. So we just want to do a bit of housekeeping. First of all, we want to just pay a little tribute to the passing of Singing Sandra, who had so many, very poignant and powerful songs for the nation. She was an educator, a teacher, and she's someone we can still be learning from. I just want to ensure that we have a bit of, order as we proceed. If someone wishes to make a contribution, save and apart from the panelists who will always have their videos on, you put on your video and you just raise your hand and we will acknowledge you, and then you will be able to ask your question. We're also taking questions that you can type in to us and we will read out those questions. You can give your name if you wish, and we'll put those questions to the panelists. You can choose if you want to put it to a specific member of the panel, and you can leave it general if you wish. So that's the basic ground rules. Those are the basic ground rules that we're functioning with. And we just ask that we have a very healthy, respectful discussion tonight, whereby we can explore the issues and touch upon the topics which concern Tobago and Tobagonians and Trinidad and Tobago as a whole. So to start off, we just want to have a look at where we're at. Today, we had a couple dramatic developments in the sense that the House of Assembly was called back again, and you had both sides, 6-6. You had the PNM indicating that they wish to have a new nominee for their choice of presiding officer. Then I think I saw, I don't know how accurate it was, but I saw what appeared to be a bit of a sit-in, whereby I think Mr. Duke and I saw Mr. Augustine, they were in the chamber, and I saw Mr. Duke calling for the clerk of the House to return so that things can proceed again. So it's quite interesting, and I would certainly love to have this explored by our panelists. And I would certainly want to start with tossing the question to Deborah Moore Miggins in terms of sharing her views with the viewers and listeners to this program in terms of, first of all, was it legal, or do you see it as something within the THA Act or within the standing orders of the THA, whereby the clerk of the House called this meeting today? So let's start with that, with the meeting today that was called. Was that something, because there are some persons who have raised questions as to the legality of it. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Dr. King Johnson as well, another son of the soil.
Good night, everybody, and thank you for having me, and commendations to the organizers as usual for this very timely discussion. Now, I cannot answer your question, mainly because as far as I am concerned, the situation that presents itself doesn't have a guideline, it doesn't have a precedent, it doesn't have any guidance from the Tobago House of Assembly Act. I think what we have a situation where there's a tie, 6-6, and we are trying to get to the first step, which is appointing our presiding officer. It appears, and we all are familiar with the fact that there seems to be no guidance from the Tobago House of Assembly Act. Now, if I am right with that, and this is the backdrop of what I want to see in this, even the fuller matter as to where we go from here. When there is no guidance in the law, when the law is silent, as far as I'm concerned, it's a golden opportunity. It's a golden opportunity because it opens the way for creativity in the solution that arises. And that is, I think, what we need now. Creative leaders who can put aside the politics. This is not politics as usual. We are finished with the politics. From the day the tie came down 6-6, it demanded a greater maturity in our selected leaders and representatives. It demanded a new approach than we even know to do. It demanded flexibility. And I think more than ever, it demanded collaboration and dialogue. And I think that is where we have gone off the rails in solving this issue. We want autonomy, and this was the first opportunity presented for us to demonstrate that we can indeed handle autonomy, that we know what is expected of us in Tobago, that we can rise to the occasion and solve this issue. Is anyone trying to tell me that of the whole 50,000 people in Tobago, there is not 1, 2, or 3 candidates that both sides with mature discussion could agree on for the purpose of appointing as a presiding officer? Is that what we're trying to say? That
okay,
we
good
have
point,
to see,
good points.
Right, that we have to see our remedy as going back to Trinidad to the parliament that is likely to take 3 to 4 months or weeks to get this situation resolved. I stop
Okay,
here,
let me
Mr.
just,
Moderator.
so I want to toss to Dr. Barnes James, but just for the guidance of everyone, in order to ensure that we have an equitable distribution of time and hear everyone's views, once I raise my hand, it would mean that you basically have 30 seconds just to wrap up your contribution so that we can hear the other views. We will come back to you again, but the point is we want to get a nice mix of the views. Okay, so Dr. James, first and foremost, I mean, I know Deborah raised lots of issues there, including how you can move forward. But just first and foremost, your thoughts on the legality of today's proceedings.
Well, if my senior lawyer says she doesn't know because she doesn't have any guidance from the law, who am I to go beyond what she has to say? But I would follow up the line of thought that Debbie has laid out here and say that this is a moment when Tobagonians can come together, both the PNM and the PDP. The 12 representatives we elected, so to say, can sit down and talk and even call our people together if necessary to reflect on the way we should go forward from here. This is a really golden opportunity for Tobago to strike out for a new development path. I think we know the fundamental flaws in the THA Act, and we know that those have to be addressed if we have to go forward. We also know that under the Act as it is currently written, we have wasted 4 decades with one-party rule, 20 years under NAR, DAC, and 20 years under the PNM. And another round of one-party rule will take us nowhere. So we need to understand all of that and sit down and put Tobago first and work out not only a matter relating to the presiding officer, but also the way we do a unity government. I think that's where Tobago ought to be going now. We ought to form a national unity government, and dare I say, a national unity government under Farley. But we ought to form a national unity government anyway, and move to address the flaws in the THA Act and the autonomy issues that confront Tobago in order to fix the flaws in the THA Act, and then launch for development as we go forward.
Okay, excellent. Thanks a lot, Dr. James. And so Ms. Denise Soyafat Angus, Dr. Denise Soyafat Angus, as a former presiding officer of the Tobago House of Assembly, who better to lead us in terms of the answer to that question? Do you think there was legality in today's proceedings? And if not, what do you think ought to have been done? And what are your views on the possible solutions?
Good evening, everyone. The legality of it should stem from how did the request come forward to the clerk? Because I saw on Facebook the letter she responded to, stating that this letter is in response to a request that she received from the political leader of the PDP to go back to the House. Now, if we have a request from the, according to the standing orders, it is only the chief secretary that can send a request directly for a special meeting. If it is not the chief secretary, then you must have at least 1/3 of the House submitting a request for a special meeting. So I don't know if there were signatures attached to the letter that the PDP would have sent forward requesting the meeting, but the letter that the clerk, the letter she sent alluded to a previous request from the PDP to have the meeting today. So, if it is that they had a number of them signed, then yes, it would be a legally constituted one. So,
okay, so therefore, from what you're saying, Dr. Angus, we would need to make some inquiries to find out from the clerk of the House whether that request fell in line with the requirements of the standing orders of the THA Act. Okay,
yes.
All right.
But additionally, I would like to add, and I like, the eloquence with which Deborah Moore-Miggins, outlined the whole issue. But I would like to emphasize my support for the fact that it is time that we show our maturity and be able to slip our party hats to one side so we can reveal who we truly are, which is that we are Tobagonian. And that if we say we are fighting for Tobago and Tobago's future, then we ought to be able to put aside our political differences and sit down around a table and come up with a solution to where we are now. We cannot say that we want greater autonomy, and yet we can't, sit down and work out challenges for ourselves. I mean, in Trinidad, I know there are times when the Prime Minister meets with the leader of the opposition and they have conversations. They may not always see eye to eye, but they have one-on-one conversations as to, some of the issues that they need to work out. I don't see why we are about a week later, and I have not heard that both sides, they've sat down around a table and have had conversations, but we continue to see everything being played out in the public eye. We need to hear those conversations. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Denise Soifat Angus, former presiding officer. So she has given us her view that there are certain requirements which would have made it legal, and we are not yet sure if we have seen evidence of those requirements. So Mr. Clyde Weatherhead, experienced attorney at law, former trade unionist, and definitely I'm sure you want to weigh in with your views on this topic. So let's hear from you, first of all, in terms of the question of your thoughts on the legality or otherwise of today's proceedings and your general ideas as to the way forward.
Well, thank you, Martin. The question of today's meeting, and I go back to sections 6, 7, and 8 of the THA Act, which deals with what should have happened within 3 days after the election. The question is today's meeting a special meeting as Dr. Angus just suggested, or is it a continuation of a meeting that started last Thursday? And is there a provision between section 6, 7, and 8 of the Act that suggests that this meeting can be as the clerk said on Thursday, the meeting in a sense was ended, but the meeting has business which the Act prescribes. And that business includes electing a presiding officer and chief secretary. So there's a whole set of business to be done. So the only thing that this meeting can go from day to day or day to another day is on an adjournment. It is a meeting
so in other words,
prescribed by the Act.
It's not an end of the meeting, you're saying. It has to be.
Maybe it's a suspension that we need to have and not an adjournment.
Well, when I say adjourn,
suspended until they can meet again. But once you say it's an adjournment, it means that the business of the House has been completed.
Right, and the question is,
from one day to the next.
What wording did she use on the last occasion when the proceedings came to an end? You see, they might seem like simple matters, but there are legal ramifications, and I think Dr. Soifat Angus is quite correct in terms of we must be careful in terms of the terminology we use, because each aspect of it has implications. But let's just move away from the strictly legal topics so far. I'm getting from quite a few of our panelists that there is a desire for Tobagonians to be able to be mature in this respect and to be able to come together. However, I do recall seeing in the press, the Prime Minister said that he does not expect a situation of kumbaya where everyone will come around and sit around a fire and hold hands and chant, you know, like the song from the famous Calypsonian merchant. So can we invite Mr. Brendan Gray, who I see is in on the Facebook Live. Mr. Brendan Gray, if you can unmute your mic and if you can put on your video, we'd be happy to hear your thoughts on whether you think Tobagonians are at that stage of maturity to be able to, you know, come together as Dr. James and Ms. Deborah Moore-Miggins have been suggesting. Mr. Gray, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, all right. If you wish, you can put on your video also, and let's hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Martin. First of all, I want to commend you and the panelists for coming and bringing this very important topic and very important issue to light in this space that we are in Tobago. So congratulations and good night to all. I want to take feed from all that was said already. Maturity must be the key word here for the progression of the state Tobago or the island Tobago. The people have spoken and they've given us a mandate which we must move forward with. It takes not only maturity, but the desire for persons to see that we're in a box. We're all in one box. And that box is saying, the people are saying, hey, you all get in that box. When you come out, you must come out with some issue, something that is benefit to us. We have been in this situation for too long. We have been fighting this issue of autonomy and self-determination for too long. And this is what the people have said. This is what I hear from the mandate given by the people. We need to sit down and be mature and come out of that box with resolution and to resolve this problem that we've been fighting for so long. There are documents left, right, and center. I've been part of a panel discussion at the library on which this issue of maturity in Tobago has taken hold. That is in 2018, we had those discussions. And I feel that it's time for us to rise above the partisan issue, as Dr. Angus has said, and most of the panelists have said. We have said that we need to rise above the partisan issue and come forward and give Tobago the opportunity that we really desire, starting from Pt James on to R. Robinson, everyone. We are fighting and we are in this box, come out of the box with something for Tobago.
Thank you, Brendan. Very good contribution there. Now, just a reminder to all our viewers and listeners, if you wish to ask a question, just put on your camera, raise your hand, and we will acknowledge you, and you would then be able to ask a question, or you can type in your question. Remember, this session is being hosted by the Tobago Civil Net, which is a civil society organization. It's non-partisan, non-political, and it's really aimed at sharing and exchanging views and ideas for the betterment and upliftment of Tobago and all Tobagonians everywhere. So Deborah Moore-Miggins, we want to just toss something back to you now. There appeared to be a bit of a sit-in in the chamber after today's proceedings, whereby I think there were some calls for the clerk of the House to come back. I think Mr. Watson Duke led that call, and I think Mr. Farley Augustine was there also. What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on their call for the clerk to come back out and to continue the process over and over and over and over again? Let's hear your views on that.
Well, based on what I've already said, you know, I would have no patience at all with that approach. I'm not criticizing it. I guess everybody has to do things the way they think best. But I do not think that is the approach that promotes what we're trying to achieve in this whole scenario. I believe that we need to emphasize working with the tie. We have a tie. I don't think there's anybody willing to cross the floor and resolve the matter in that way. I mean, our brains now have to be ticking as to what else could be done. Frankly, I may not be sufficiently schooled in politics, but I don't really see that approach of the sitting and all that taking us to where Tobagonians want to go. They have skipped over a very important step. When the vote is finished, you ask yourself, well, what now do I think I could contribute to achieve the goal that we have in mind? What is the goal? The goal is to get the assembly up and running. We have been given equal hands. So the next question is, how can we maneuver ourselves to have this equal hand promote the goal of Tobago getting up and running? Now, I don't believe the confrontational stance so early. I would not have advocated. I would have advocated, it's finished. Let us try to understand what the people of Tobago have said, or what God, providence, whatever, has dropped on us to move this country forward. And
thank you, Ms. Deborah Moore-Miggins. Very good contribution there. And Dr. James, what are your views on that approach that was taken this afternoon by Mr. Watson Duke and Mr. Farley Augustine? Now, if you don't want to commit yourself to an answer, Dr. James, you don't have to, but we'd like to hear your thoughts.
Well, I'm a straightforward man. I would not go down that road that way. What I would suggest to the 12 representatives is, even if you couldn't get through this business of picking a presiding officer, you still have the option as the representatives selected by the people of Tobago, elected by them, to sit around the table and try to read these results. And I think these results tell you two basic things. First of all, the people have really voted to remove the PNM from the Executive Council. We no longer have them in a position where they could form the Executive Council the way they have been for 20 years. Secondly, the results seem to me to say, as a political scientist, that the people must work together. The two parties must work together. And therefore, I think of that as a government of national unity. And I would sit around the table. The PNM has to come to the table with maturity. Having been there for 20 years, thinking through what is in the best interest of Tobago, and given the mood of the population as shown by the elections, the PNM has to come to the table and understand those results and work to form a government of national unity. And I dare say the election results signal that if you're going to do that, it's going to have to be a government under Farley Augustine. And the reason for that is that the PNM has signaled over the 20 years, and the Prime Minister said so himself, that the critical issues relating to the THA Act and autonomy, they cannot deliver, and they're not interested in delivering it. The Prime Minister said he couldn't get it done. And the government had 20 years to remedy the flaws in the THA Act, and the PNM did nothing to treat with that over the 20 years. So now I don't think if you put them back in the Executive Council, they're going to bother to do anything. And as a consequence of that, I think you create a new executive under Farley with a specific mission. And the mission is really, if I may just be very brief, is really to do four things. One, you have to make a move for autonomy by putting forward Tobago's own, the THA's representatives' own version of the autonomy bill, because the bill you have in the House now can't pass. Secondly, you have to go down to Trinidad with that bill and lobby the parties in Trinidad, on the UNC side and on the PNM side, as a united front from Tobago, in order to get the autonomy bill passed. Then you take that bill as the third thing, and you come home and you reform the THA and fix the flaws. The THA Act has one critical flaw we must fix. It provides for an executive. It makes no provisions for oversight of that executive. And it makes no provision for the people of the country, of Tobago and the country, to petition the executive in a structured way. That has to be fixed if we're going to go forward together. And finally, what we have to do between now and when we get that done is use the $550 million that we have of development allocations that are still available for spending between now and September to launch at least one major development program that would move the economy forward. And if we put that agenda forward around the table, the PNM would show where they stand, and so would the PDM, and we go forward as an island.
Okay, thank you, Dr. James. Thank you for that contribution and laying out those 4 points which you see as fundamentals for us to be able to move forward. Dr. Denise Sorafat Angus, I'm so glad you are here because we're relying on your expertise and experience as a former presiding officer. So tell us your thoughts first and foremost on what appeared to be almost a sit-in this afternoon by Mr. Duke and Mr. Augustine, in terms of that as a possible solution, or do you, as Ms. Deborah Moore-Miggins says, disagree with that as an approach? First of all, let's hear your thoughts on that.
I definitely don't think it's a solution at this point. I believe that it is a bit premature to go down that road because all of the other avenues, in my view, have not been exhausted. And we have to understand whether it's through divine order, through the people, that these two parties were given a mandate of 6 and 6. And they cannot ignore that. It means that there is a mandate that says neither of you won and both of you won. And if they can come to grips with that, I think that they can start to find a way to think outside of the box. You know, take for instance, the chief secretary. The chief secretary is chosen with, or I'm saying the chief secretary is elected by the House. Okay? The deputy chief secretary is elected by the House. If we have an approach of what I call shared governance, right? Dr. Vanas would say the PNM lost 4 seats. However, others would say the PNM won the popular vote. How
Well,
can we
actually,
use those to
Dr.
work
Soifat, that's a
together?
question
Is it that
just
you
came.
say the current chief secretary,
Soifat.
Ansel, could stay as chief secretary, Farley could be the deputy chief secretary, and they find a way to divide and make up the executive council with persons from either side, and then you leave the rest of them as a mixed group within a body of what we would call the minority, so that they can provide the oversight needed. But I think at this point, they need to start talking to each other. I cannot believe that they have not sat down around a table yet and have had conversations about how to go forward with Tobago's business. If you say you love Tobago, then sit down and talk.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Angus. And Dr. James, bear in mind, we have a question for you from a Facebook viewer. They're asking, how can you say that the PNM, that people voted to remove the PNM in a 6-6 tie if the PNM gained the popular vote? So think about your answer to that, but let's hear Mr. Clive Weatherhead in terms of his views on the apparent sit-in that occurred this afternoon. So Clive, share with us from your legal expertise and your trade union expertise, because I'm sure as a trade union leader, you would have staged many sit-ins and maybe successfully so. So is it a good technique that Mr. Duke employed as a trade union leader by staging the sit-in? Let's hear your thoughts on it, Clive.
Well, the biggest sit-in in my experience was in 1981 in the PSA elections. When this matter, you remember, it went to court and it was taking months to resolve that election. Mm-hmm. And the bulk, a bulk of members not affiliated with one or the other team went and occupied the PSA building, firstly to secure the ballot boxes, and secondly to try and ensure that the teams got together and tried to resolve the issues and get an executive in place. Now, the issue of what is happening in the THA, I know Vanas talks about national unity, government, and so on. And some years ago, Deborah dubbed me an honorary Tobagonian when I went to a discussion at Works and left my daughter with strangers at the hotel. I am of the view, and I have said it publicly, that I think the real solution to the situation now is to have that bill in the parliament amended and passed, because that bill addresses both the Constitution and the THA Act. So fixing the THA Act simply to get an executive in place at this point in time will only leave us with all the problems that we've had since 1889.
Okay,
so,
thank you. Mm-hmm.
May I say here, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure, Deborah.
Whatever, we need to bear in mind that fixing the act may take 3 to 6 months, from what my estimation, I may be wrong. And the minute the act is fixed, an election has to be called. That is particularly why I kind of don't like the idea of calling an election to resolve this issue, Because we call an election now, we fight and we bring the act to fruition. And in 6 months, we have to call another election. So Dr. Soyafat has proffered certain solutions. I don't particularly agree with them, but they are on the table. What I'm saying is those solutions only have to be in place for about 6 months. It's 6 months we're talking about, whatever the solution.
All right, great, thanks a lot. Okay, so Dr. James, defend yourself. The people on Facebook are asking, how can you say that the people voted to remove PNM in a 6-6 tie when the PNM won the popular vote? We're giving you 1 minute to answer your question, Dr. James.
Well, the popular vote has no bearing in the context of elections in Tobago. They are a figment of the distribution of the population and the areas, the concentration of the PNM support in the west of the island. That has no bearing on the interpretation of the 6-6. The way you get to my solution, my interpretation, is that the PNM lost 4 seats. And the momentum suggests that the population thinks it should be removed from control of the executive. So that's the fundamental result. And then the other part of the result is 6-6 means national unity. Come together and work out the answer.
Okay, great, thanks a lot. All right, so another question that arises, and this is coming from our Facebook viewers. The question is, there was a solution that was posited by Mr. Farley Augustine at the first sitting of this new assembly when they could not resolve the deadlock. He suggested that you look to Section 92, you look to the standing orders of the THA, and therefore you have resort to the standing orders of the Parliament, and you use that as a basis for going forward, which then leads you to a situation where you either draw lots or you toss a coin. Okay, now we heard Ms. Tracy Davidson Celestin as the leader of the PNM in Tobago. She said that it would be reckless to leave it to the toss of a coin. So that's the view from the PNM side. The PDP is saying, Farley Augustine said publicly that he is willing to take the chance. And he says, even if it falls against him, and he has to sit 4 more years in opposition, in the minority, he does not mind, but he thinks that that's the solution. So again, Dr. Angus, we call upon you for your expertise in this regard. Let's hear your thoughts on this idea of using lots or tossing a coin to determine the issue. And does this scenario present itself as one whereby you can adopt the approach legally, we're asking, that Mr. Farley Augustine has suggested?
You know,
Dr. Angus, you're freezing up. All right, so let's just toss that question to Mr. Clive Weatherhead while Dr. Angus gets back online, because she's frozen right now. Clive, let's hear your thoughts.
Well, I've heard different views on that question. The Chief Secretary said today that
sometimes in Parliament you have to separate.
That
said
those
sometimes.
things,
Okay.
that those.
Yes, Clive, go ahead.
He expressed the view that those rules don't apply because you don't have a presiding officer. And therefore I go back to the point that this meeting is not a regular sitting of the Assembly. This meeting is what is mandated by Section 6, 7, and 8 of the Act. It is a meeting to elect a presiding officer and so on and so on. So the question then is, in applying the standing orders, what in Trinidad would be, in terms of the national parliament, would be a similar situation, 1818? And in that situation, nobody applied any standing orders of any parliament because it's a different situation. The president appoints somebody as the prime minister based on his perception of who has the majority support in the parliament. In Tobago, the chief secretary is elected by the assemblymen. So there's no issue of, and what was done in the 1818 is that the 2 political leaders told the president, really, forget the law, we are agreeing that you decide who is the prime minister. So I don't think we could just forget the law in this situation.
Okay, all right.
But
Great.
those things
Thanks.
are not, in terms of the parliament, it didn't work like that, and it is not relevant to the THA at this point in time.
Okay, great. So therefore, Clyde is clearly against the idea of tossing the coin. Back to you, Dr. Angus.
I am totally also against the idea, because in Trinidad, you go into the house already having a prime minister and a leader of the opposition, and therefore you're just choosing the speaker of the house at that time. And you could afford to pull lots at that time because the government has already been established. But in the Tobago scenario, you go into the house without a confirmed establishment of the government. So you're going into the house to choose a presiding officer who would then in turn choose the chief secretary, and who would then in turn call for the election of the chief secretary and the election of the deputy chief secretary. So perhaps, in this case, it's a bit more democratic, where the house actually elects the chief secretary, and it could be anybody sitting in that room.
Okay, great. All right. So a valid point and a novel idea from Dr. Angus. So I want to just go straight to Deborah Moore-Miggins, because I think we all know where Dr. James stands on this. So he will get the last bite at the cherry. So Deborah, let's hear your thoughts on this idea that was put forward by Farley Augustine in terms of what he suggested, that you have recourse to the standing orders, and then from the standing orders of the THA, you pivot to the standing orders of the National Parliament, which lead you to the question of a toss of a coin or a drawing of lots. What are your thoughts on that from a legal standpoint,
Oh,
Mr.
well, you asked me from a legal standpoint. The thing about it is, I don't know from a legal standpoint if anything in the parliament is relevant to what is in the Tobago House of Assembly. We are a creature of statute. Our resolution of our difficulty must be found within the four corners of that statute, as far as I'm concerned. And I am also saying it can also be found within agreement and discussion. Why jump away from a collaborative approach? It is very beautiful to speak to your opponent in the interest of development and accomplishing goals. The act of sitting and working things out has a beauty and a maturity that we have lost, we have not experienced in Tobago, because the politics continues right down. It continues to who is employed, who gets contract. No, I think Tobago is saying no, that we don't want that anymore. It's counterproductive. It doesn't get us anywhere. Let us find a way to exchange ideas as creative, mature people, so that Tobago can move forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Deborah Moore-Miggins. So therefore, we're getting a very constant theme from Ms. Deborah Moore-Miggins. She feels very strongly and passionately that we've been provided with a unique opportunity here in the 6-6 scenario to be mature and responsible and come together to find a collaborative solution.
Absolutely.
Dr. Vaness James, in terms of the solution posited by Mr. Farley Augustine, the one where he suggests from a legal standpoint that we can move from the position of the sections 6, 7, and 8 of the THA Act, go to the standing orders of the THA, then if you don't find the solution there, go to the standing orders of the National Parliament, leading us now to drawing of lots. What is your position on that? We've given you 1 minute. Dr. James, tell us your thoughts, legally.
Well, that's not well, I hear Clyde and I hear Debbie, and I would hear you too, from a legal standpoint.
I'm the
moderator. I'm speaking as a political scientist, and my advice to Farley would be, you cannot go to the people of Tobago and say that we are settling the issue with respect to the choice of presiding officer and chief secretary and so on by casting lots. I think what is required is for us to work out the interpretation of the results, the mandate the people are giving us, and the instruction that suggests as it relates to how to form the next government. And I think that's eminently doable. And as I said, where it points me is towards a government of national unity. And I again repeat, the evidence we have is a government of national unity under Farley will deliver the things we have to do. A government of national unity otherwise will not.
All right, thank you, Dr. James. All right, so Dr. James is of the view that we should have a government of national unity in Tobago, but united only under Mr. Augustine. That's, I think, his view in terms of being able to move forward. All right, so just one thing that has been troubling a lot of people, and I see it's been a question that our Facebook viewers are asking. The question is, going forward, if we are to make fundamental changes to the THA Act and the Constitution in terms of how we govern Tobago, should the Chief Secretary be someone who is elected by popular vote from all electors? In other words, don't leave it to the 12 assemblymen, because we've seen 12 assemblymen sit and not even be able to reach to the position of being able to elect a chief secretary within the last few days. Should we have that hived off as a separate position? So in other words, you vote for your 12 representatives, but for the position of chief secretary, it can come from anybody. It could be an independent like Dr. Soyafat Angus, who went up as an independent, right? We had Nkosi Phillips also as an independent. We had Ricardo Phillips as an independent. We had Mr. Hector, Anthony Hector as an independent. So all of these people can put their hats in the ring and say, listen, vote for me for the popular vote for the position of chief secretary. And of course, that doesn't prevent the other 12 representatives from also being up for grabs in terms of them saying, vote for me as chief secretary. So let's think of that, and I want to hear thoughts on that. Let's start with Mr. Brendan Gray, as you come on there. Let's hear you on that topic.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Martin. This is exactly what we had in the election. The vote was for a chief secretary, because Farley was chief secretary for the PDP, and Miss
Tracy
Davidson was chief secretary for the PNM, and we were voting for a chief secretary. That's who you. That was the because the PNM says once you are the leader of the party, you will be the chief secretary, and similarly Farley as the leader of the PDP.
But Brendan, no, I don't think the people will accept that. Farley's not.
I know. I hear. But this is my point. This is my. I hear.
Your logic is not.
No, we have to listen to the people. We have to listen to the questions that they are asking.
Yeah,
and persons want to know.
Can I have my minute? Can I have my
minute? Brendan. Yes. Okay, you could have your minute, but use it wisely.
Thank you.
The question that is being asked, and if it is you talking about leaders of the parties, Farley is not the leader of the PDP, so you can't go down that road. They're asking, and just for clarity, because I want all the panelists to contribute, and I want members of the viewing audience to also contribute on this, because actually we want to hear more from the members of the public on this rather than the panelists, because this is something I think that is near and dear to the heart of everybody. So Brendan, you were chosen as the first representative from the public. The question is, and we're talking about going forward, should the chief secretary be elected en masse from the popular vote of everybody, separate and apart from the 12 representatives? Yes or no? And if you want, give brief reasons.
Well, I would again go back to my original statement. It can be either way, because of what the act has is what it has. We want to move away from that. Fair enough. And it can be like what you're saying is like the president of the United States. He's elected en masse. That's what you're saying. It's possible. Is that something that you want in Tobago? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
Okay, all right. Okay. Brendan is not sure. All right, Brendan, you're not sure. All right, so members of the public, all right, Ms. Shirley Cook, let's hear your views on this. Unmute your mic, please.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Quite an esteemed panel. My question really is, with everything that's been said this evening, it is clear that the THA Act as it stands poses a lot of problems to move forward, because it has to do with taking a lot of time to redo the boundaries and all of that. The structure that you're talking about with electing a presiding officer, electing a chief secretary from the population voting for a chief secretary, all that would require a whole change in the governance structure of Tobago. Why are we not focusing on trying to get our autonomy bill passed once and for all, and then we create the kind of governance structure that we want here in Tobago? Why don't we push for that? Is there any room for our members of parliament, East and West, to articulate that on our behalf? I have not heard from them. Do they have a role in this? And as much as persons are saying that the parliament should not get involved, remember that we still are ruled under a constitution. And even though we're saying the law, the fact is, if this, and I articulated that, had happened in Trinidad without the constitution directing them, this would have been an emergency situation where Parliament would be sitting to address it. What are your thoughts on that? We're fighting with the act that presently is, and it is a challenge. Isn't it a lot more feasible to get the population on board to fight for an autonomy bill in short order so we can resolve the myriad of problems that Tobago are experiencing, even if we go to another election in the next month?
Fair enough. Thank you, Ms. Shirley Cook. All right, I wanted here on this question of should we elect the chief secretary by popular vote? Deborah, quickly, 1 minute. Let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me, because I think yes. I think yes, because listen, if you study the implications of that, it means you can have a chief secretary who comes from nowhere, none of the parties, the 12 men, different party, chief secretary different. And this is the kind of overall input, the kind of collaborative thing I'm speaking about, because now we have to sit down around the table and match each other and see how we could get to where we want to go. So excellent. I give it a wholehearted yes.
Thanks a lot. Dr. James.
Well, I think the way I would respond is that I would say that we can make the existing approach to picking a chief secretary work. We do not need to elect a chief secretary in a standalone fashion. And if we try to do that, by the way, that would not rule out political parties ganging up to pick that person. But
no, just now, Dr. James, we need to be clear. We are saying that you put it to the popular vote. So in other words, separate and apart from your 12 assemblymen, you are also having a separate vote for the candidate for chief secretary. Who could
I understood that. And I'm saying, and I'm answering that by saying that's an option. But in the context of the experience across the Caribbean, it would not appear to me to be the best choice. We can make the existing approach we have to picking the chief secretary work by an appropriate set of reforms of the THA Act itself to provide for oversight so that the executive is itself a very small minority of the overall Committee of Representatives. And the reason people are worried about the chief secretaryship is they're preoccupied with an executive that has been out of control here for the longest while. So what we need to do is put in place appropriate adjustments to allow for oversight of the chief secretary, and we'd be all in good shape.
Okay,
so we don't
great.
need to go down that road at all.
All right, so we heard from Ms. Deborah Moore-Miggins, who is fully in favor of electing the chief secretary by popular vote because she thinks that that would help to, bring the unity between the parties, that they'd be forced to come together. Dr. James disagrees. He thinks that, look, put more oversight controls and you can keep the current system. Let's hear from Dr. Angus on this. Dr. Angus?
I believe that it is something to be explored. It will probably be considered an advancement in our democracy. And so it is something that can be considered. But I think I want to go back to Ms. Cook when she when she speaks to just focusing on getting the greater autonomy bill. And yes, I think it's important that we have to focus on that, but we also need to ask ourselves in the interim, what do we do whilst we wait or champion the greater autonomy bill? And we also have to be thinking about short term. What do we do now in terms of governing for the next 6 months while we wait on the bill to be delivered to us? And additionally, there are some issues within the bill that must be addressed, and those will not be done overnight. Take, for instance, deciding on the constituency numbers, whether